This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Clive Bull.
Good morning, LBC. I'm Clive Bull with you till 4 o'clock. We'll take some more calls on homelessness and what Suella Braverman's been saying, but I want to look as well at the King's speech. As you just heard in the news, Rishi Sunak has issued a statement about what's coming up in the King's speech. And actually the anti-tent measure will be part, we believe, of the King's speech this week, as will a number of other acts to do with housing. So just to tell you, first of all, what Rishi Sunak said, he issued this statement saying, "Just as I have done with energy security, net zero, illegal migration and HS2, the King's speech will take the long-term decisions to address the challenges this country faces." He's really hoping he's going to get a long term, not the easy way out with short-term gimmicks. As part of this government's commitment to create a better and brighter future, the King's speech will include a package of measures focused on strengthening our society and helping people feel safe in their communities. And that's about law and order and the tents and clamping down on homeless people, rough sleepers and so on. But there are going to be a number of other things in there, particularly to do with housing, which I think is very relevant to what we've been talking about over the last hour or so. So it's reported in the Observer this morning, they understand that it's going to include a recommitment to a manifesto pledge to ban so-called no-fault evictions. Could that be a good thing for renters? It comes after Sunak was warned by officials that Tories would face the consequences at the ballot box if it failed to appeal to an expanding group of young renters. Well, I'm not sure that one action will help them really appeal to young renters, because young renters are mainly aware of exorbitant rents. That seems to be a big problem, and I'm not sure no-fault evictions make much difference one way or the other. Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, has said that the ban would only kick in after reforms in the court system. Also, rights for leaseholders and renters are going to feature, but leaseholders, the changes there will include a bill that ensures that new houses in England and Wales will have to be sold as freehold properties rather than leasehold, which leaves owners with extra costs. Now, on that particular point, and I'd like to hear, by the way, what you think of all of these ideas on housing. Or I should add that Labour also issued a statement on housing and the King's speech. They have vowed to deliver, they've just released this a couple of hours ago, Labour have vowed to deliver more action on housing in the first 6 months of office than the Conservatives have delivered in the past 6 years. This comes, it's reported, after Number 10 confirmed the Renters Reform Bill will be in the King's speech. Labour says housing sector changes promised by the government, including overhauling the leasehold system and abolishing no-fault evictions, have been watered down since they were first made. Well, let's get a view on, particularly on the leasehold issue, and talk to Harry Scoffin, who is a housing campaigner and a co-founder of Commonhold Now, a grassroots campaign organisation committed to ending the leasehold system in England and Wales. So, Harry, thank you for joining us. What do you think of Michael Gove's plan then?
Well, I think it's less Michael Gove's plan and more Number 10 and Rishi Sunak's plan. And it's a real shame because I met Rishi Sunak, believe it or not, in a Bethnal Green living room in June 2018. And lovely guy, you know, he was a local government minister at the time. And he said, "What do you do?" I'm saying, you know, I'm doing this campaign to get leasehold abolished, because every other country in the world, when you buy a flat, it's yours, you own it, you appoint the managing agent, and you're a little bit like Alan Sugar on The Apprentice. If someone's ripping you off, you're not happy, you just say you're fired and you get a new company in. And it's quite a democratic system, Commonhold. And he said leasehold is a scam. My colleague Heather Wheeler is doing great work in this area. That was all those years ago now. Successive Conservative governments since 2017 have promised that they were going to take action on this. Millions of pounds of taxpayer money was pumped into the Law Commission, who came up with some brilliant recommendations and reports in 2020. This is so many years ago now, and yet we get that story in the Sunday Times yesterday, and it seems like it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Yes, they're going to be abolishing leasehold on houses, but that was yesterday's scandal. At one point, I think about 15% of all new build houses were sold on a leasehold basis. That was about 2016. Now it's down to about 1%. So the fact is, that was yesterday's issue. The real money and the real abuse is going on in flats, and it's actually ruining people's lives. The idea that you can't control your own costs for something as fundamental as a home you bought, and for my generation, I'm 28, I live at home, we're never going to be able to afford a house. So for us, it's going to be a flat. It's going to be living in cities. So we've got to get flat living right. Scotland and every other country in the world have forms of Commonhold.
Is that right then? I didn't realise. I assumed it was a bit of a British thing, but is this pretty exclusive to England then, this whole business of having a lease? And why? Why have we got it and nobody else has?
So it's an England and Wales phenomenon, and many of our former colonies, yes, they inherited common law, but as soon as they got independence from us, the first thing many of them did was rush to get rid of it. So it goes back to 1066, William the Conqueror nicking the land, giving it to his mates who obviously became the landlords. And there was a very good reason you had leasehold. For a number of years, our legal system couldn't cope with the idea of freehold flats. So it wasn't until 2002 that you could, well, it was only possible to have a leasehold flat until 2002. The Labour government introduced Commonhold after Margaret Thatcher was really pushing for it. So was John Major. They brought it in, but unfortunately, 1 year after I was born in 1995, they had promised in a report called An End to Feudalism by the late Frank Dobson and also Nick Rainsford that all new flats going forward, once they'd introduced Commonhold, would be Commonhold. So there would be no more leasehold. And unfortunately, they got bullied and threatened by the property interests. And, you know, I don't like conspiracy theories, but maybe that's what's happened to this current Conservative government. All the work's been done on Commonhold. And I think there's a fundamental thing that it goes back to serfdom and manorialism. And yes, we may not have serfs anymore. They're called leaseholders. And these freeholder landlords, they are owning the fruits of people's labour. These service charges are going through the roof. And even Hamptons, who may have an interest in talking up the flats market, earlier this year they've come out and said England's leaseholders in flats are going to be paying a crippling £7.6 billion this year in service charges. Imagine that money. Yeah. That could have gone into setting up a bona fide business, setting up a family, or just participating in the consumption economy. And when we're talking about 5 million homes are owned, I put owned in inverted commas because it's a tenancy agreement. You don't actually own. You own time. You own a right to live in that property. And what's so unfair about it is that the value of your investment, the most important purchase of your life, is dependent on the conduct of a landlord. And it's not like some buy-to-let landlord where you can, you know, go and meet him, or you can deal with him and you can discuss about what needs, you know, doing in the property. And also in a well-functioning rental market, I know we've not got that at the moment, but when you've got lots of supply, if you're being ripped off, you can leave a bad landlord behind with your capital intact. Problem with leasehold is you've got a landlord that's got all the control, all of the power, and the service charges, they bring it up too high, or they don't maintain the building because they're sweating the asset.
Is it the service charges you're mainly concerned about then? Is that the real downside of this? Well,
the thing is, there's been a series of reforms that have been brought in by various governments, Harold Wilson, Margaret Thatcher, John Major and Tony Blair. And they looked at this whole issue of the short leases, ground rents. Absolutely, the government need to go and actually cap existing ground rents. But for many leaseholders, particularly in the flats, what is the real poison is service charges. Banks are now pulling loans, mortgages off these flats like they were with doubling ground rents 3 or 4 years ago. The fact is these have become very toxic, and actually the gap between house and flat prices in this country, in England, is at its widest in 30 years. And absolutely, the fallout from the horrific Grenfell Tower tragedy in 2017 is what has actually illuminated the fact that these freeholders, they're supposed to be the noble custodians and own the buildings. But as soon as they were being asked to pay to remove dangerous cladding or fix fire safety defects on buildings that they legally even own, they scarpered and said, actually, we don't own these buildings.
Nothing to do with us. Yeah.
Nothing to do with us. And the fact is, independent analysts, not campaigners like me, are saying actually the flats market in England and Wales is irreversibly harmed, because while it can be a house, an Englishman's home is his castle. But unfortunately, because of this archaic, abusive system of leasehold, with a flat, it's the mighty landlords. And you may be very interested to know that we've got the second lowest proportion of flats in our housing stock in England of any country in Europe after Ireland, which also struggled with the leasehold inheritance from British rule. So every other country in Europe and around the world, they have a Commonhold system. Yes, residents might fall out. Residents might not agree all the time with things that need doing on their building, but generally there's an alignment of interest.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about that, actually. When the alternative is Commonhold, but you've got to have some system if a whole load of people all jointly own a block of flats. So how does that work then? Just give me an example of how that works.
The beauty of Commonhold is that you've not got leases anymore. Yes, you'll have rules that you have to live by. You'll have the Commonhold Association, but you own your flat on a freehold basis, so it lasts forever. It's not a decaying or wasting asset. And also you own a share in the common parts. And the beautiful thing about that is that you will appoint the managing agent. Everyone will have a stake in the running of that building or that development. And obviously the managing agent, it will come up to the annual general meeting. You'll decide as a collective whether you want to keep that managing agent. Are they performing well? Are they giving value for money? Are they accountable? Or are they doing some naughty things that they shouldn't be doing? Are they using, related contractors and there are backhanders going on? Or are they just absentee and they don't really care? They've taken on too many developments it's almost like a restaurant where they do too many franchises. They're caring about growth so much they lose the customer in mind. The fact is that, yes, residents may fall out, but Winston Churchill once said, democracy is the worst system except for all others that have been tried. Leasehold, where the freehold is owned by the property developer or a third-party investor, maybe in a tax haven, many of them are now, that is what we've got an issue with. And actually, ironically, I was interviewed just a few hours ago on one of the TV channels, and they said, well, actually, leasehold inherently isn't necessarily a bad thing. Correct. Where the freehold is owned by a resident management company and everyone has a stake and everyone participates in that building, that's fine. It's where you've got the freehold and it's an investment asset in ordinary people's homes, and it's someone that wants to extract as much income out of the building as possible. And that's what we have an issue with. And where we feel with the government is that they're going wrong on flats. And actually it's quite, I don't know what the word is, it's a bit of a gimmick to go on leasehold houses, a policy that they have announced many times before. And actually you've got to go back to July 2017 when Sajid Javid was the housing secretary. He announced this. So it's hardly going to set the world on fire. And actually the thing that they could really do very easily, that's not going to cost the taxpayer a penny or the Treasury, is to say all new flats Commonhold. And if you can't even do that, because I understand there's an argument, well, Commonhold's not proven itself in this market at the moment. We only have, unfortunately, 20 Commonhold developments. Because obviously, if you make so much money from leasehold, developers are never going to let go of that drug of choice unless you ban them from doing so. But even if you can't mandate Commonhold on flats going forward, you can at least say Commonhold or share of freehold. Because the government have said a leasehold house is wrong and a home should be on a freehold basis. Why on earth are they not applying that concept to a flat where the opportunities for abuse are way worse than in a house? And the fact is, this bill will be a huge betrayal of the millions of people up and down the country. And we're not just talking about London. We're talking about Bolton. We're talking about Manchester. We're talking about Birmingham. We're talking about Coventry. That these people have not got control. And I've got a personal interest. My mum's impacted. Her service charges have gone up 40% in 2 years. You cannot sell the flat. You cannot even sell it at auction. And we've got one of Britain's richest men controlling this building and running it almost like a cartel. And we can't have a chat with him. It's not like the freeholders of the 1970s and 80s, where it was more like a little buy-to-let landlord where they'd have one or two freeholds and you'd have a coffee with them and they would talk about fixing the roof. And these are the different quotes that they've got. We've got none of that transparency. And the fact is, as long as leasehold continues, there will be opportunities for abuse. There are so many votes in this, Clive. Many of them Conservative voters. Many of them in the blue wall. Everyone says red wall's going back to Labour. The Tories need to focus on their southern heartlands. And we're not even just talking about leaseholders. We're talking about aspirational young people that want to get a foot on the housing ladder. Yes, we've got the mortgage issue, but the idea that you get out a mortgage on something that even once you've redeemed it, after 20, 30 years, some of these mortgages are going crazy long for my generation. You don't own it. You don't control it. And you know what? These service charges are becoming a second and third mortgage. It's an iniquitous system. And actually, if the Conservatives are an actual Conservative party, they'll back Commonhold. They'll make it compulsory on future. And for existing, they'll make it easier for those of us in the trap, in flats, to compulsorily buy out our freeholds. Because that's already on the statute books, and to convert to Commonhold. At the moment, if you wanted to do Commonhold, they've got some Soviet-style threshold. You have to get 100% of all the leaseholders, 100% of all their mortgage lenders, and you've also got to get the support of the freeloading freeholder that you want to abolish. They're never going to sign up to that. So the Law Commission have done all the work, and we're going to be working flat out between now and the King's Speech and beyond to persuade the Conservatives. And guess what? Who coined the word Commonhold? It was the late Conservative MP, Sir Brandon Rees-Williams. Thatcher, on the last day that she was as Prime Minister, she asked the Lord Mackay of Clashfern, her Lord Chancellor, to bring forward a bill on Commonhold. John Major promised it in 92. So actually the idea of spreading land capital is a very capitalist thing, very conservative, real home ownership. And all we want, and we're not moaning, we just want the same rights of ownership as our friends in Scotland, Northern Ireland, the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Actually, that's not too much to ask, especially when, for so many of us, buying a house is going to be out of the picture. So we need to get flats right, because if we want to build up, and everyone goes on about the Greenbelt, you want to protect that, you've got to build up in the cities. Let's make flat living work. And you know what? Rishi Sunak might even win the next general election off the back of this.
Well, I don't know about that. Harry, thank you very much indeed. Harry Scoffin there. Very passionate case being made. Do you feel strongly about leaseholds? He's a housing campaigner and co-founder of Commonhold Now. And that is going to be in the King's Speech, we're told, that change, although it is going to be a very much diluted change compared to what was promised in the manifesto, as Harry was saying. More of your calls coming up in a moment. 0345 6060 973 LBC.